Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping into the highly classified cockpit of one of the world's most advanced and, well, most controversial pieces of military hardware, the F-35 Lightning II.
For years, the question has just lingered, not just in military circles, but, across global politics. Does the U.S. or Lockheed Martin hold a secret kill switch? Some way to unilaterally ground or disable an F-35 that belongs to an ally?
It really is a geopolitical thriller concept, isn't it?
It is, and to be fair, Lockheed Martin has publicly stated very flatly, no, this switch doesn't exist. They claim an absolute commitment to their customers. And, for a while, that public denial seemed to work. The debate in Europe kind of quieted down.
But that denial, it really only tells half the story.
Exactly.
And that simplistic view, looking for one single big red button labeled ground fleet, it completely misses the fundamental nature of modern interconnected weaponry. So our mission today isn't to find that mythical red button. It's to analyze the deeper, more pervasive and interconnected dependencies that your sources reveal. The reality is that the control isn't exercised by one switch, but by a whole series of choke points.
Okay, so not one switch, but several.
Right. We're going to unpack 4 distinct mechanisms. They range from, contractual agreements all the way to proprietary software codes. And if leveraged by the United States, they could progressively cripple the aircraft's operational effectiveness.
So it shifts the question from, does the switch exist,
to how many non-obvious switches exist and what kind of power do they truly grant the supplier? Okay, let's get into this system of control. We should probably start with the least technical, but, well, maybe the most foundational layer of control, the paperwork, the contract itself.
Yeah, how powerful can a piece of paper really be against a $100 million fighter jet? It's not hardware, it's not software, it's just a contractual obligation.
But that's the key. Your sources point to specific leaked provisions from Germany's contract to buy the F-35. And these clauses explicitly state that the aircraft cannot be used if that operation runs contrary to the stated interests of the United States government.
So it's a U.S. veto right baked right into the purchase agreement.
Legally codified, yes.
Now, on its face, you might look at that and say, well, that sounds normal for allies. But the history of international arms deals is just littered with examples of those contracts being, ignored when a real conflict breaks out.
It is. And this is where the context gets really interesting. Your sources remind us that the Germans themselves were famously caught in a pretty high-profile diplomatic row with Turkey, a NATO ally.
With the Leopard tank.
Exactly. Turkey had bought German Leopard tanks, and the contract specified they were only for defensive use.
And then Turkey just went ahead and used those same tanks for offensive operations against Kurdish forces in Syria, completely contrary to the agreement.
Completely. So the question becomes, if Germany, the actual supplier, couldn't stop Turkey from using those tanks, why would a piece of paper stop, say, the Netherlands from using the F-35 in a way the U.S. opposes?
The moment a country feels its own vital security is threatened, those contracts they become theoretical.
They become purely theoretical. It's respected only as long as it's convenient for everyone involved.
So that's the heart of the skepticism, isn't it? The contract is a lever, but it's maybe not one you'd want to rely on by itself. It's the legal deterrent.
Yeah.
So what about the technical ones?
And that's the next layer. This is where we move from the theoretical legal switch to the unavoidable operational reality. The U.S. needed to layer control, knowing that legal clause might just be ignored. This is where it gets really interesting. We're moving from paper promises to a persistent technical dependence, spares, and maintenance. Every pilot knows an aircraft is useless without parts, and the F-35 is arguably one of the most complex machines ever flown. It relies on a centralized, interconnected system. Initially, this was the Autonomic Logistics Information System, ALI.
The infamous ALIA.
The infamous ALS, now being replaced by a new system called ODIN. But their function is the same. It's not just inventory management, it's predictive maintenance.
So they're constantly talking to the aircraft on the ground, even in flight.
When it's safe, yes. And they use these sophisticated algorithms to predict when a component is about to fail.
Okay, so let's say the system calculates that a critical heat exchanger is running hot and it's probably going to fail in the next few flight hours. It automatically alerts the maintenance staff on the ground.
It does more than that. In theory, the system automatically issues a just-in-time order to Lockheed Martin to deliver that specific part to the unit, wherever they are in the world.
Okay.
That's the cornerstone of the whole high-tech maintenance promise.
But I remember reading about the massive problems with ALIs. It was buggy, right? It was forcing ground crews to use spreadsheets to track things, which defeats the entire purpose. And even if it works perfectly now, how is this different from, say, buying spare parts for an F-16? Couldn't a country just stockpile F-35 parts? And that is the critical difference. You can stockpile parts for an F-16. It's a standard, durable airframe. The F-35 is different because of two things: complexity and integration.
Okay.
Many F-35 components are custom, complex electronic assemblies with, short lifespans. If the system predicts a failure, you have to get that part immediately because the aircraft's own mission system might ground it until that replacement is confirmed as being on its way.
And the biggest vulnerability, it's the source. All spares for all international customers are drawn from a single, central, global pool. And that pool is managed entirely by Lockheed Martin.
One pool for everyone.
One pool. It was supposed to drive down costs, but it created this perfect logistical choke point.
So a single order from the U.S. government could just shut down the entire pipeline instantly.
Yes, it wouldn't cause a crash, obviously. But unlike with simpler aircraft where maintainers can, improvise or cannibalize parts from another plane,
Yeah.
the F-35's complexity makes that nearly impossible.
So without that steady stream of approved, certified spares...
The readiness rate of that foreign fleet would just progressively degrade, slowly,
Oh,
but
right.
inexorably, until the planes are all grounded, simply because they're waiting for system-mandated repairs. It's a slow-motion grounding of an entire fleet, a technical inevitability if the supply is cut. That paints a very sobering picture of just how deep that operational dependence goes.
Okay, let's shift from physical reliance to informational reliance. This gets to the absolute core advantage of the F-35, its situational awareness, which is completely dependent on these highly classified data files.
Let's focus on these so-called scenario files. What are they exactly?
They're essential. Absolutely essential. These are massive databases, often hundreds of gigabytes in size, containing specific classified information on literally every potential opponent the aircraft might encounter.
Yeah.
It's the digital brain that knows the enemy.
And what does that brain do in practice? These files are what allow the F-35 to automatically and reliably identify and classify targets. It uses very subtle cues, faint signals from radar returns, unique infrared signatures to say definitively that blip on the screen is an Su-30 in an air-to-air configuration, and this is its likely combat profile.
Wow. So it's not just identifying, it's analyzing.
And it contains the opponent's entire order of battle
Right.
for that specific theater of operations. It's an incredible advantage.
It sounds like a continuous real-time intelligence feed baked right into the plane. But, can't our sophisticated allies, countries like Japan or the UK, can't they just build their own threat libraries?
You'd think so, but no, they cannot. The complexity is just astronomical. It's not just about tracking what the enemy is doing today. It's about conducting incredibly detailed experiments. How do specific aircraft shapes reflect radar waves at different angles? How do new jamming techniques look on the F-35's sensors?
So you need this massive research infrastructure to build these files. Massive. And the sources are clear. These files are built, fused, and continuously kept up to date by dedicated centers only in the United States. This creates a huge ongoing informational dependence for every single foreign customer. So let's walk through a scenario. A non-U.S. force is in a major regional conflict the U.S. opposes. The threat environment suddenly changes. Most enemy radar system comes online, a new fighter jet shows up. What happens if the U.S. just withholds the updated scenario files?
The impact is profound. We know there were early problems with some F-35 variants having limited bandwidth, so just downloading the files was slow and painful. But if the U.S. stops or delays the updates, well, the aircraft doesn't fall out of the sky.
But its main advantage starts to erode.
Immediately. Its generation-defining advantage, the sensor fusion and situational awareness, it begins to degrade. The older the data, the less reliable the identification, the slower the pilot's response. It fundamentally cripples the aircraft and makes it less effective over time.
The F-35 is only as smart as the information the U.S. chooses to feed it.
That's it, exactly. Okay, so that's 3 layers of control. The legal contract, the logistical supply choke point, and the informational lifeline. Now we get to the final and most mysterious mechanism. The security protocols required to simply operate the aircraft. The digital keys. This is the area that's most shrouded in secrecy. And for good reason, because this touches on the potential for an instantaneous hard kill switch. But we do have evidence that these kinds of locks are standard on modern platforms.
You're talking about the Russian Su-35.
Yes. Your sources cite that fascinating case where the Chinese acquired the Russian Su-35. They got the jet, but after some technical issue, they had to ask the Russians to literally fly to China to unbreak it.
Which confirms there are proprietary codes you just have to have. It strongly implies it. If you don't have the key, you just own a very expensive, inert piece of metal. Now, for the F-35 specifically, the assembly line itself is technically unclassified, but many critical electronic components have American anti-tamper mechanisms built in, and these are designed to basically self-destruct or brick the component if someone tries to open them or mess with them.
Precisely. It's a powerful deterrent against industrial espionage or any kind of unauthorized modification. We also know that non-U.S. users are generally denied deep access to the proprietary software.
With one big exception, right?
Israel. They've negotiated for partial software access to make their own mission modifications. But for everyone else, the software is a black box.
So the hardware is physically protected, the software is locked down, but what about just day-to-day operation? Starting it up, running diagnostics.
And this is the critical unknown for you, the listener. While we know the anti-tamper hardware is American, the sources don't clarify who manages the essential codes needed to maintain and start the aircraft day to day.
So are those codes managed nationally by the purchasing country, giving them autonomy?
Or, and this is the crucial part, do they require a constant connection or maybe regular validation from a central U.S. server?
That ambiguity is the leverage.
It is the leverage. If, for instance, a major system diagnostic requires a validation code from a U.S. facility, or if the plane has to phone home for a digital handshake every so often, that single point of contact becomes a silent technical kill switch. It's a dependence that could be leveraged instantly.
Let's bring this all back together, because what we've really uncovered is that the F-35 kill switch isn't a single button. It's a sophisticated, four-layered system of tiered controls, all designed to ensure continued U.S. influence.
A system of systems.
Right. We have the explicit contractual lever, that's the legal deterrent, then the logistical choke point of the centralized supply chain, which ensures a slow, progressive grounding.
Then the mission dependence on the U.S.-sourced scenario files, which can blind the aircraft over time.
And finally, the mysterious unknown control over the essential access codes and anti-tamper mechanisms, which, well, that could be the instant ground command.
These four mechanisms, together, they highlight a crucial truth about modern high-tech weaponry. Buying the physical hardware doesn't grant you simple, traditional ownership anymore. It establishes a complex, critical interdependence with the supplying nation.
So for any country buying this jet, achieving true military sovereignty is extremely difficult.
Perhaps impossible. When the core logistical, informational, and operational brains of your top fighter aircraft remain inextricably tied to another country's infrastructure, your autonomy is fundamentally limited. And that raises a final, fundamental question for you to consider as you digest all this. If the core mission data, the essential spares, and the underlying operational codes for a major combat aircraft are all managed from a central point, outside your borders, does buying the hardware grant you true military sovereignty? Or are these nations merely entering into a very expensive long-term leasing agreement for operational capability? We'll leave you to chew on that.